Good afternoon, ladies and gents. Welcome to this Energy Revolution session titled Innovation in Low-Cost Renewables. My name is Jean-François Segalotto. I am a research manager with a big analyst firm that's called IDC. I am part of what is called IDC Energy Insights, so I'm part of the business units that looks at IT and operational technology across the spectrum of, say, the energy value chain. I'm proud to walk you through the session this afternoon and welcome you to EUW today. So, low-cost renewables. I think Europe, European renewable industry has had, I would say, one obsession over the past 20 years or so, which has been cost, and one mantra: we should get cheaper. And once we get to grid parity with conventional resources, then we're talking. Then we'll finally see things happen. And when I say grid parity, I mean that the cost at the emission in the grid for electricity generated with renewable sources will be the same as that generated with conventional or let's say thermal technologies. In that case, we'll finally be able to say what we want to do. So that time has come. That step has been crossed, and depending on where you look, depending on the region, depending on the technology, that has also been surpassed. We're now moving from subsidies and feed-in tariffs to actual bidding. We are seeing purchasing power agreements pop up across Europe. We're seeing something in Spain, something in the Netherlands, something in Germany. The rising cost of fuels and CO2, so finally rising cost of carbon emissions, mean that the new renewable plants can finally compete with existing fossil fuel generation on the running cost. So the cost of producing electricity using renewables in Europe is now lower than the simple cost of CO2 and fuel. So stripping out all the costs of maintenance, the capex, everything else, I think is a big milestone. As IDC Energy Insights, we've done a few calculations, and it appears that grid parity, price parity, is being reached also on small scale photovoltaics plus battery systems. So I would say that the cost of generating electricity is not the issue anymore. The issue is rather how we translate low-cost renewables in cheap electricity for the end user. And to do that, we need to do a lot of things in the middle. So between generation and consumption, we need to change how electricity is transported and it's distributed. We need to change some of the things that the TSOs and DSOs are able to do. We need to change some of the market rules. So it's really about translating low-cost renewables in cheaper, more reliable electricity for the end user, while at the same time being able to continue to invest in renewable energy to achieve our long-term decarbonization targets, which in Europe are very ambitious. Enough of me speaking. I'll actually introduce my first speaker, who is Karl Zach, and he's a project manager with one of the utilities hosting us today here in Vienna, which is Verbund. And his presentation is about sectorial integration and sectorial integration of energy and industry, green hydrogen for the steel-making process. Karl Zach, the floor is yours.
Thank you for the kind introduction. Do I have to do something? Just click there. Okay. All right. Seems to be doing fine. Okay, good afternoon to everybody. Thank you for being here and listening to my presentation about sectoral integration of energy industry, green hydrogen for the steelmaking process. As already said, I'm working for Verbund. Verbund, just at a glance for some short words about Verbund itself. Verbund is an Austrian utility having about 95% production of renewable sources, in total about 128 hydropower plants. It's Austria's leading electricity company with about 3,000 employees and is 51% owned by the Republic of Austria. First of all, I want to look with you together at the challenges which we are facing in the near future and already now. The first challenge which is presented here is the challenge in the massive growth of the surplus electricity, which also leads to an increased storage demand in the future. So this massive growth in surplus electricity is of course because of the large growth of renewable electricity production, which is volatile by its nature, from wind and photovoltaics. You see here two different scenarios from Agora Energiewende, which have a prognosis about to 40% of surplus electricity in the year 2045. The second challenge which I want to address today is the challenge of the decarbonization of all sectors. The transport sector, the industry sector, and the heating and cooling sector, in order to be able to reach the target of not having an additional climate change, additional climate warming in the system. In order to reach, I also already said about that we also need additional storage. So it's not about just focusing on the renewable generation in electricity. We also need to focus on how this electricity, how the surplus electricity we just saw, can be stored in the future in a renewable way, in a CO2-free storage source or storage media. Currently, there are about the storage volume of the energy demand in total of the world is about 15%. And these 15% are divided into most of them are CO2 based, so natural gas, coal, and also oil are the most used energy sources for storing energy at the moment. Just 1% of the total energy storage at the moment is in form of a renewable source, more specifically in the form of pumped hydro. So, in order to also boost this share of renewable energy in the storage sector, we need also additional sectoral integration in terms of hydrogen, for instance. So this sectoral integration with renewable electricity, if we look at the different sectors, how this could be done. On the one hand, we have the transport sector, where already now electromobility is deployed in an increasing scale, but also hydrogen mobility is another way forward. In the industry sector, power to hydrogen or power to chemicals. If you look at the heating sector, power to heat, power to gas, and also storage in form of renewable gases and reconversion afterwards is a potential way forward. Yeah. So Verbund want to be more than just a deliverer of green electricity in the future. Already now we are operating a large amount of pumped hydro storage plants in Austria, 21 in total. We have a trading floor 24/7, and our vision is that we want to deliver this green electricity to make green hydrogen in form of a PEM electrolyzer for the industry and for other business customers. As already said, currently 95% already now from the capacity of Verbund are from renewable sources. Most of them are hydropower plants. So these 128 hydropower plants in Austria and Germany with a total capacity of 8,200 megawatts. We also operate 153 wind turbines in Austria, Germany, and also in Romania. You see here on this picture below, you see all the hydropower plants in Austria situated on the various rivers. In order to achieve this target of decarbonization, the target of sector coupling, sectoral integration, Verbund is increasingly starting to have cooperations with big industry, with other industries, with other industrial sectors. On the one hand, with voestalpine, a leading technology and industrial goods group focusing on the steel making and steel production. And on the other hand, also together with OMV, which is an integrated oil and gas company. So the target of these corporations, on the one hand, to supply this industrial sector, these industries with green electricity, but also focus on additional flexibility from them. So also incorporating them in our demand-side management system, and also strengthening their security of supply. For the further presentation, then we'll focus more on the steel making industry, which we have currently running a project with voestalpine. This is this green hydrogen project, H2 Future. We want to operate a 6 megawatt electrolysis plant in Linz. So if we now focus on the steel industry, you see here the global annual steel production is about 1.6 billion tons in 2016, of which are 160 million tons based in the European Union. The specific CO2 emissions are approximately 2 tons per ton of steel, which makes the steel and iron industry a huge emittent of CO2. In total, about 30% of the overall industrial sector are from the iron and steel industry on a global scale. Currently, the steel production is relying on two different processes. On the one hand, you have the blast furnace route, which has as base iron ore, and on the other hand, electric arc furnace, which is from scrap iron. In the future, these processes might change or should change to a direct reduction route using green hydrogen. So in the steel making, hydrogen is in direct competition with carbon and also with natural gas as reducing agents. So if we want to replace carbon within the now commonly used routes in blast furnace, you also have an increase in the production cost. So if you look at blast furnace, you have a 100% increase in the production cost. If you want to replace carbon in the direct reduction with natural gas, you have an increase of about 130% in the production cost. If you want to do this in the direct reduction with green hydrogen, you even have higher costs with about 180% of the original production costs. So this replacement of green hydrogen as reducing agent is the only realistic way also to fulfill the CO2 targets set in 2050. You see also there below the chemical reactions for the direct reduction with hydrogen. So now focusing on the H2 Future project, green hydrogen for the steel making industry. You see here the vision of voestalpine for decarbonizing their steel making process from currently using blast furnace route, as already mentioned, and then increasingly going to this direct reduction with green hydrogen in the future, leading to a reduction in the carbon emissions from nearly 80 to 90%. So within the project H2 Future, we have formed a consortia involving Verbund Solutions, voestalpine, Siemens, K1 Med, Austrian Power Grid, a transmission system operator from Austria, and also ECN from the Netherlands. The overall project budget is 18 million, total funding 12 million euros from the fuel cell joint undertaking from the European Union. The project duration 4.5 years. We started last year in January. What we want to achieve there within this project is the installation operation of an electrolysis system at the voestalpine production site in Linz, Upper Austria. So the key data of this electrolyzer, it is a 6 megawatt polymer electrolyte membrane electrolyzer. The plant commissioning is planned for the end of 2018, so coming soon, actually. And from the beginning of 2019, we start a 26 months demonstration and quasi-commercial operation phase. You already see here the building where the electrolyzer system is housed. So the water electrolyzers is basically a stack of individual cells you see here. So we have 50 cells per one stack. In total, this 6 megawatt electrolyzer system will have 12 such stacks, which are put together by Siemens. The project objectives, again, a little bit more specific here. So the design and installation of the 6 megawatt Siemens PEM electrolyzer system at the voestalpine steel plant in Linz. So we also have then the industrial integration of this renewable hydrogen within the production process of the steel making. And then afterwards, some more. Sorry, didn't do anything. Okay, back again. As said, from the beginning of 2019, we have this 26 months demonstration of the electrolyzer system, where we on the first hand focus on testing the electrolyzer, having some stress tests, also continuous operation of the electrolyzer for 24/7. Then also we want to pre-qualify the electrolyzer system for the power reserve market, starting from frequency containment reserve, but also frequency restoration reserve. So primary, secondary, and also tertiary control in Austria. We want to test the integration of the electrolyzer system in the steelworking operation, and then also have this in total then 18 months of this quasi-commercial operation of the electrolyzer. And also we want to operate the electrolyzer continuously after the end of the project. When looking at the current status of the H2Future project, you see here the building process in the pictures. So in November 2017, the permits were received. In August of 2018, the building was finalized. You see here that on the one hand where the electrolyzer system will be housed, there's a huge glass facade. This is directed to a public street crossing by. So in theory, you can really look into the building when you drive by and see the electrolyzer. In November, so this month, the electrolyzer system will be delivered to the building and will be installed there and then commissioned in the beginning of next year. And for the test operation will start afterwards. So you see a scheme of this electrolyzer in blue. So the electrolyzer will produce up to 1,200 cubic meters per hour of hydrogen. There's already extensive press coverage also for the H2Future project. There's a lot of international attention also beyond the EU. It's a European flagship project, and we also have a dedicated website for it, where you can also find more information about the project, and also a short video about the project, which more or less gives the same information as I'm currently giving you. So in overall, we will see that we'll have a huge demand for renewable electricity for sectoral integration. Already now, Austria has some ambitious targets for renewables, so they want to have 100% renewable electricity within Austria by 2030. So this mission 2030 from the Austrian government right at the moment. But this will face huge challenges. because we also will have a huge amount of additional electricity demand. On the one hand, from the steel making process. So if we really want to have a decarbonized steel making process, as shown with Voestalpine, so one plant alone, this Voestalpine plant alone, will lead to an additional electricity demand of up to 30 terawatt hours per year. So this is about half the electricity demand of whole of Austria today, just to give this in some perspective. Additionally, we have electromobility, which also leads to an additional electricity demand of up to 13 terawatt hours per year. As already said, the demand for flexibility and storage will grow significantly with this huge share of renewables in the electricity sector, and hydrogen can be one renewable energy source for storing these large amounts of renewables in the electricity system. But one thing that needs to be in place is a regulatory framework which also gives incentives for such decarbonization in a cross-sectorial way. So that was my presentation. Thank you for your time, and yeah, I think we have time for questions or.
Thank you. Thank you, Carl. Any questions from the audience? And to ask your questions, you will need to grab the microphone box here. Any questions? All right, I have one question, if I may. So you said 30 terawatt hours just to neutralize, let's say.
Yes. To decarbonize one steelmaking industry in Austria.
Austria already has a plan to decarbonize entirely power generation by 2030. How far do you think you can go as far as decarbonizing the steelmaking industry is concerned? Because it's a lot of energy.
Yeah, it's a lot of energy.
Of course, doing that with renewable energy is the only way forward. But I'm struggling to understand where will you get the ability to develop enough renewable energy to cover that. And once again, I don't think Austria is planning to fully decarbonize steelmaking, but at the same time, the end game is that.
The focus on the government is really to decarbonize the electricity sector. So, but if you also incorporate the other sectors, this leads to this huge additional demand, which is currently maybe not in the heads or not in the view of the government. This leads to huge demand of electricity additionally, and this will be hard to achieve, I think, at least in the current framework. So currently there's not much incentive or not much regulatory framework in doing so, or in really decarbonizing also the steel making process. Other than CO2 prices, which are not that high at the moment. So it will be really hard to achieve these goals. I mean, when you look just at the technical potential of renewable electricity in Austria, there is actually a lot still untapped, mainly from PV and also from wind. But again, these are more costly than the ones that are currently already deployed. So this will again need some incentives to really go that way.
But the point here is really to be able to store excess renewables as hydrogen and then use that hydrogen in the steelmaking process, which essentially, as you said, is about integrating two sectors. Thank you, Carl. Round of applause, please. So our next speaker is a French guy from GRT Gas. He is going to tell us about West Grid Synergy, which is a couple of pilot projects in the west of France, where they're trying to make a smart gas grid that's able to integrate more biogas in the short term and more power to gas in the longer term. Romain, the floor is yours.
So good afternoon, everybody. My name is Romain Vel. I'm a business developer at GRT Gas. So GRT Gas is one of the two gas transmission operator in France. We are a gas TSO and one of the most important in Europe. So the topic of this session is to make a presentation of a project we are working on, a project called West Grid Synergy. West Grid Synergy is a large smart gas grid project dealing with the impact of integration of biomethane. So this is a demonstrator of what could be and what will be the networks, the gas networks of tomorrow, with an important part of biomethane inside. So, yes, thank you. Click here. So, sorry. Okay. Good. So this project is a demonstrator of what will be the gas grids of tomorrow, will be an important part of biomethane, because we think that there is an important and smart link between the integration of biomethane into grids and the need for gas grid to be smarter, in fact. So before beginning the presentation, I would like just to make a focus on the French biomethane development and why we think that it's, for us, a new gas revolution. So currently we have almost 70 units injecting their production into gas grids, representing almost 500 gigawatt hour of production. So it's clearly little when you consider the French gas consumption. But what it's very interesting to see is the development dynamic, because we are on an exponential trend. As we can see on the project's key figures, we have almost 500 projects in feasibility studies. So it's projects for which project holders have paid studies to operators. So it's well-matured projects, and it's obviously very important considering the 70 units in operation. But it's just part of the project portfolio, in fact. But these 500 projects will represent a theoretical production of more than 11 terawatt-hour of production. So it's not little anymore, and that's only a short-term vision. So that's why grid operators in France think that the target of 10% of biomethane into the consumption, it's a target of the French energy transition law. This target will be reached and also exceeded, and that's why our message today is to talk about a target of 30% of biomethane. 30% is clearly ambitious, but it's quite better when you consider the exponential development. So this huge development is also a new paradigm for gas system, because gas grids must reconciliate historical consumptions and these new local productions. So local productions because agricultural biomass are non-relocatable resources. It's unthinkable to move biomethane plants far from resources. Resources belong to territories So, but on this territory there is not necessarily cities and grids and consumptions. So the first issue for gas operators is to work on the availability of gas grid. But on the other hand, when you have a look on the average project size of biomethane plants, we see that considering the high level of modulation of the consumption from 1 to 10 between winter and summer, we could have saturations in summer. And gas grids must also reconcile all these multiple productions with this historical demand. It's also a new paradigm because because actually the gas grid system is a cascade system. It's a gravitationary system with different TSO grids with a different level of pressure, and also different DSO grids with also a different level of pressure, and finally the customers. And globally, the gas system has a huge integration capacity. But this capacity is not well distributed in territories. So we have local DSO with little consumptions, and then the closer you are from customers, the less integration capacity you have, in fact. So when you look, this structure as integration with integration capacity, then when you want to inject into TSO grid, there is no problem. But sometimes when you inject into DSO grids, then you may have saturation. And in France, the development of biomethane plants is very important into DSO grids. So, and obviously the summer period become a constraints period. So gas networks must also facilitate the integrates of all these new flows for which they have not been historically designed. And finally, gas infrastructures were smart yesterday, are smart also today, but have to be smarter tomorrow in order to manage correctly these new flows. So after these technical points, finally the development of new approaches about gas infrastructures is also the opportunity to deploy digital tools. As an example, for GRTgas, digital is a tool to decompartmentalize infrastructure, to create values for all gas chain players, and to work on the efficiency of the global system. So it's clear that TSO and DSO have interest in deploying new sensors into grids in order to know what happens in real time in their grids, but also consumers and producers, and we have to work on. We have to share data with consumers and producers. As an example, with this new balance, local balance that we have to manage with producers and consumers, we can deploy a platform with data in order to, as an example, synchronize maintenance period between producers and consumers and grid operators in order to work on to have a better availability of integration capacity, in fact. So digital will be at the heart of tomorrow's gas system. So at GRTgas, when we think about what is a smart gas grid, we see 4 strategic directions. The first one is to maximize green gas integration at the best cost, to improve the global efficiency. So also coupling the energy networks as power to gas as an example, and to share information for our stakeholders for more efficiency, in fact. So we are working on a lot of projects, and one of the most important concerning the impact of biomethane is waste grid synergy. So waste grid synergy, as I said, is a project it's a demonstrator to make some experimentations of what could be this tomorrow, this grid with 30% of biomethane inside. So we want to work, we want to deploy new solutions to integrate more and more biomethane in grids. We want also to work with innovative solutions on flexibility system, to work on the flexibility system. We also want to, through digital technologies, improve the efficiency of the global system. And Waste Grid Synergy is for us a large project concerning also the geographic area. It's a project in western France with 12 partners, with communities, and this whole community designed this grid of tomorrow. It's also a large project considering the topics we want to solve. As an example, we want to work with innovative infrastructures. So we want to deploy new gas infrastructures called reverse flow units. These reverse flow units is a new object in the interface between TSO and DSO, able to capture the excess of biomethane from DSO grid and to inject into TSO grid with a compression unit. We also want to work to make some experimentations on the gas flexibility with the users and users. We want also to deploy new sensors to know what happens in our grid, to make some simulations. And with this technical dimension, we also added a social dimension in order to adapt the solutions on each territory, because the territories of the scope of the project haven't the same level of maturity, the same ambitions, the same issues. So we have to adapt these solutions to each territory. So to make it concrete, just a few examples. I told about reverse flow units. So this reverse flow unit is compression units between DSO and TSO. So it's a new interface between two operators, and this now the flow will be in both directions, in fact, with the delivery station in one way, and reverse flow units to capture the excess of biomethane into DSO grid and store it to TSO grid. So if we want this unit to work in efficiency, we have to make all these objects. We have to make communications with all these objects. As an example, if we want to manage in a dynamical way this interface and to adapt the pressure of in the DSO grid, we have to je suis en train de me perdre. Sorry, je ne sais plus. Yes, and we want also that these reverse flow units work in an efficient way. Not on the same time, as an example, with the delivery station. So in this project, we also want to make a dynamic pressure management. So actually, in a part of our system, there is a flat management of pressure. So if we deploy new technologies, we can adapt the pressure to the real needs, and so we can liberate injection capacity into DSO grids for free. And also, if we minimize the pressure into our grid, then we can minimize costs for producers because we minimize the effort of compression for producers. So that's also a service that we want to develop with the project. And finally, we want to share informations. And as an example, producer could be interested in getting information about the predictive injection capacity in order to have the information on saturation moments in order to be able for them to adapt their production to the real consumption. We want also to give informations to community and deciders to have the information of what's the part of biomethane into the consumption in order to work on local energy transition and communication to citizens, as an example, and to be able after to make the implementations of new biomethane plants easier. And as I said, network operators with, as an example, predictive maintenance. So the project is still in defined phases. We want to deploy the first use case at the end of next year, and we see after a 3-year period of deployment, and to be ready after 222 to deploy industrial solutions and to be ready for 2030 for 30% of biomethane in the consumption. So we are very happy to work on this project because the ambition is to bring new solutions because there are needs, there are real needs, and I also apologize for my level of English, and I promise you to do better next time to present when I will present the first results of the project. Thank you.
Thank you, Romain. Can you hear me? Yes. Any questions for Romain? No questions. You're very quiet. Yeah. Yeah. Go ahead.
Need the microphone? It works, or? Hello? Okay. So my name is Sven Goethaus from BayWa, German biomethane producer as well. So I was just wondering, all these wonderful initiatives, is there any exchange of experience across countries, like for instance Germany, Belgium, Netherlands, that are as well quite advanced in biomethane? Is there any exchange of experience planned in the future to share all your positive projects and make sure that the experience gets spread around the world?
So yes, at first, reverse flow units exist in Germany. So it's in the Green Gas Initiative that we have had exchanges with such solutions. And of course, we are just in the beginning of the project, but we have the ambition to communicate and to give informations of the results and what will be a good solution and what won't be a good solution.
Thank you. Any other questions? Can I ask questions? So you mentioned a number of enablers to let's say get from the target of 10% of biogas or renewable gas in the system to, I think, 2030 is the target year. So you mentioned investment in the grid, of course, because there's a matter of congestion, especially in certain regions that produce a lot of biogas. But then there's dynamic pressure management, predictive maintenance for the gas operators, of course, and then dynamic pressure and reverse flow. any obstacles that you see to the 30% target to materialize? Because there's a huge gap between what the government mandates and what you are planning to achieve. So what are the obstacles there?
So, sorry, there is an important difference because 10% is finally just a point of our development graphic. So we think that we could do better, and we have to. And green gas has a role to play in the energy transition. So that's why we talk about these new targets. It's clearly an ambition, an important ambition. But if you want to be understandable, we have to put some important steps, and this step is for us something good for the development of biogas.
Well, thank you, Romain. Round of applause for Romain, please. So, our next speaker is Ursula Crisper, who is head of Advanced Services Department and Projects at Electro-Ljubljana, which is a DSO in Slovenia. Her presentation is around hybrid VPP for DSO, which is a project looking at integration of DERs, so distributed energy resources, into the distribution grid using a hybrid virtual power plant. Ursula, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much again for my announcement. I will today present the hybrid VPP for DSO project. This will be the first part and the core of my presentation. And at the second part of presentation, I will just slightly go through another project, which is the hybrid, which is the, I have to apologize, which is the Integrate. And we are also the partners of the Integrate. And why? Because the Integrate is a kind of second step of the hybrid VPP project. Who are the partners? Because I must mention also that this project ended last year in 2017. Well, the official end date, it was the end of 2016, but we prolonged it for half of a year. So the partners were the partners from Austria and also the partners from Slovenia, as our company, the Slovenian DSO, were, and then the Technische Universität aus Wien, Energiesysteme, Grazer Energieagentur und Energetic Solutions. The energetic solutions, they enabled this economics analysis at the end of the project. So what were the goals of the project? So what wanted we achieve with the first idea when we started with writing the proposal? So we knew that we have a lot of generation available in the grid, and also and also flexible demand. And how could we this available flexibility integrate in not only for the market purposes usage, but also for the grid usage, and this was the main idea. So, and our aim was that we could, with this project, propose some business models which could enable the deployment of both of this market grid aspect of the virtual power plant, and also the power plant which is dedicated to serve the DSO. in the project, we pass a few stages, and one of the initial stages was that we, both DSOs, the Austrian and the Slovenian, we identify the critical areas of the grid. That means that we try to identify where, in particular parts of the grid, the flexibility of the active power could help the grid operation. Then the simulation of the suitable measure were taken. Then the hybrid VPP has been developed, and the simulation of the alive or of the real VPP have been done. And at the end, we tested the whole system, the VPP, the grid operation in the laboratory environment. The concept was like this. So we had the middle voltage and the high voltage grid, and we observed the operation due to the simulations. And we identified some parts where the change of the power, of the active power, could caused by the market or asked from the market side, could not cause any critical situations in the grid. Then we identified some semi-critical, critical, and as in the end, the highly critical. So there could be no change of the power just because of the grid operation. And this is so-called the traffic light system. And why I'm mentioning this? Because also the Integrate, the next project, will include this approach into it. The use cases. So we defined 3 different use cases. So the classical one, the VPP, is for the market. So the flexibilities have their own price, and we use it, for example, for the tertiary reserve. Then why will be customers interested for the participation? Because being flexible, the grid connection costs might be reduced. This is one of the ideas, of the main ideas. And the third one, I'm going just very fast through because the time is limited. So, and the third use case is the flexibility for the needs of the DSO. Why would we be interested? Of course, again, the grid, the operation of the grid, the capacity of the cables, they are limited. Why not to use the available flexibility at the customers and to solve this problem in forward? And here on this picture, you can also see a picture of the Austrian part of the grid, which has been, as well as the Slovenian one, analyzed during the simulations. And this slide might tell us the most. So what have we been doing in the project? So first, we provide all necessary input data. These were the data about the grid, so we can simulate, we can draw actually the grid. Then we as a DSO, we provide all necessary data. I mean, also the 15 minutes data of all the loads and all the generators connected to the selected part. Then the power factory, power flow calculations have been done. And the results of these calculations gave us the grid state and the orders for the active power regulation. And all this data came to the hybrid VPP algorithms. The VPP was capable to calculate or to select best available flexibility by the price, because we simulate the real market on other side of the side of the VPP. And all this operation gave us the selected flexibility activations. And as the final result of all this procedure, was the financial economic evaluation. Because at the end of the project, we of course defined if all these solutions are also economical feasible. So here are some slides which can show us what happened on the selected part of the Austrian grid, which was observed in the power factory. We also observed what is happening with the level of the voltage. And here we have the picture of the middle voltage. And upper picture shows us the situation without using the hybrid EPP, and the down part shows us when we use the flexibility thanks to the VPP. And this is the basic scenario without any changes at the generation side and also at the consumption side. It means that we didn't simulate larger generation for a few megawatts or larger consumption for a few megawatts. The next slide shows us the scenario in the future. We assume that in 2013 we can have more and more hydropower plants, because this area in Austria has these problems with the voltage just because of the very rich production of the electricity especially during the spring and summer, when the consumption is much lower. And we again use the hybrid VPP approach, especially you can see when it was used for the market purposes. And then again, the selected part of the grid, the B side, again shows us that we could support the grid via using the virtual power plant functionalities. And the final result, so over the simulation, was that only in 2 cases the activation of the flexibility was, let's say, unsuccessful. All other activations give us the positive results. And here just the coordination scheme, so the regulatory issues. So we came to the conclusion that we can have within this product, so the totally model using the hybrid VPP as a service provider. Then we can have a model with a single market. This is a question. Then we have this classical model with the aggregator, and of course then the DSO aspect is the pure flexibility. And the conclusions, so as mentioned even a few times before, so we proven the concept of the hybrid VPP. The flexibility could be used for the market purposes and even for the DSO, that the DSO have an interest because the results were positive, that we can have an influence especially on a voltage levels. It is of course envisaged that the Austrian DSO will use this approach as a commercial implementation. And now I will go just briefly through the Integrate. The Integrate, it is a project supported by the European Commission. It is one of the projects from the Horizon 2020. Here we work together, 14 partners. And what are the objectives? I will just show at once everything. So again, we will try to use the flexibility available all over the grid. That means that we will involve also the industrial as well as the domestic customers, and their flexibility, they will participate for the needs of the market and as well as for the needs of the DSO. And the demos, we have now 3 demos. This is the one demo is in Portugal, another in Slovenia, and the third in Sweden. Especially the Portugal and Sweden, they try to work with the domestic customers, with the households, and to install the latest technologies at their homes. In Slovenia, we are more focused in using the virtual power plant for the need of the DSO, and we will involve only the industrial customers. But again, the approach of the traffic light system will be used, and of course, we will, let's say, enlarge this project also with the replicability and scalability analysis. And now we are in 2018. We are now in the stage of the preparation of the demos and in the stage of consumers engagement. Then after, till the end of the project, these are, well, the main milestones. And the concept is, so we are here as a DSO, and then on the one side we have the DSO who is interested to buy the flexibilities for the market purposes. Then we have again the end users who are the providers of the flexibility. And what is special here, because as I told before, in the hybrid VPP project we operate only one virtual power plant. Here in this project we operate beside the virtual power plant also the grid market hub. This grid market hub enables what? The conventional system do know only when we have several VPPs and they are providing their services to the TSO, to the market operators, and then we have these balance group responsibles and the DSO, so all the stakeholders involved. With the integrated approach, we will have the GM hub, and this GM hub will serve as a interconnection or the connection between all these entities. So it will enable the exchange of the necessary information. And just this one last slide, how the VPP and the integrated operate for the needs of the renewables and the industrial consumers. So we will use the services of the virtual power plant for one side for the TSO for the market needs. So we will use it for the tertiary reserve, just as a case study in Slovenia. And on the other side, we will also try to show some use cases for the needs of the TSO. And thank you very much for listening to me. Okay, any questions?
Any questions for Ursula? No questions. I will ask maybe a couple ones. So you mentioned participating customers get a discount on the grid connection fee as a result of participating in the hybrid VPP for the SO. Any indication of what is the saving by, let's say, class of customers?
Yes, we made a calculation for one use case when we had one industrial customer, and with thanks for the flexibility. Well, I have not now the exact numbers in my head, but we calculated that no additional cable is necessary if the customer wants to have a bigger connection. So, and if the calculation is just simple, what is the 1 kilometer of the cable instead of just enabling him to
rolling out the
yes,
infrastructure, you
existing
make that a
cable
discount.
or, yeah.
Okay. Another question, and you showed there was a slide. If we go back a bit, there was a number of market models. It was at the end of the hybrid VPP for DSO presentation. I was wondering if the project, this one, yes, if you have come up with a cost-benefit analysis of what is the most promising of those models and which one it is.
No. Well, the most promised was the model with the aggregator, this classical one. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
That's what I was expecting.
Yes. Because if I look at this situation, the role of the DSOs and this new, let's say, services which could be developed, which could we be running to use our own customers for the grid operation needs, well, these services are not yet developed well. And for example, in Slovenia, we do not have any price list, if I'm just directly.
So what happens is that this guy here develops the market and create the price list.
These markets are well developed. So we know the entity of the aggregator, and he's offering the flexibility of the customers behind. Okay, and this is the classical.
Another advantage is that below this there can be smaller and smaller loads compared to the other cases.
Yeah.
So, okay, thanks. Round of applause for Ursula, please. So at this point, I should have Sven Gotals on stage. Oh, it's you. Oh, great. So Sven Gotals is a sales manager at BayWa Renewable Energy, which is a German renewable energy developer and solution and service provider. The floor is yours.
Because there is a video starting, that was the story. And the play on the screen. Oh. Normally there is on the screen if you clean it starts. But okay, I will shift. Try to. Normally there is a screen here starting the video. Okay, if it doesn't work, I will continue then. Okay, no problem. The beginning was a video, but apparently technically it doesn't work. I'm sorry, but allow me to start. My name is Sven Gotals. I'm working at BayWa. So BayWa is one of the worldwide leading renewable energy project developers, and I have the honor to give you an introduction to our first subsidy-free solar PV plant, which has been built in the south of Spain. And I will try to show you in my presentation what made the success of this plant and what this new plant will create in terms of disruption in the energy market. So basically, the agenda is to show you what are the costs of production. So if today you would build new renewables around the world, where is the industry going to? And I will show you some insights into this milestone project in Spain. And number two, I will show you later another big revolution next to the technology, which is the business models. More and more corporates today start buying renewable energy directly from the producers through so-called power purchase agreements. So I will explain you how that works and what are the trends and how the industry is moving forward into this regard. And then point three, I will show you the combination of both, how this will help us in massively deploying more and more renewables around the world. And then I will show you in terms of costs what is a kind of view ahead the next 10 years, what we do expect in terms of deployment. And next to the new business models and the decreased costs in the deployment of renewables, there are many more disruptions coming on. So I have seen many interesting presentations like hydrogen storage, like smart virtual power plants. So the point 5 in my presentation will be kind of summary of all these new trends coming up. But allow me first to introduce to you the very first large-scale solar projects in Europe without subsidy, which is the Don Rodrigo project. But allow me first to explain you a couple of definitions. When talking about so-called grid parity, what is grid parity? It means basically that your production costs of your newly installed production plant are basically beating the existing production methods that are around. And you will find an abbreviation quite a lot in my presentation, so I will start first by defining it. Normally, how do you measure your production costs of a renewable energy plant? You always talk about so-called levelized cost of energy. And what is a levelized cost of energy? It is basically the costs you invest and that you spread over the years divided by the amount of energy you will produce. And this is the kind of benchmark when people invest into new plants if they are competitive with the market prices. So this term levelized cost of energy is a very important one that you will see a lot in my presentation. So first, a couple of facts and figures about this milestone project. So the project has basically been developed already for 5 years. BayWa has believed that the grid parity in Spain would be coming. So we have secured in one of the nicest spots in the south of Spain with the highest irradiation, a waste dump. So waste dump has the benefit that it has a double function, so you don't use any agricultural land. And this milestone project is really huge. It will give electricity to almost 100,000 households, and it's spread across 93. So the exact hectares I don't know anymore, but it's more than 1 million of panels. So you can imagine what kind of a surface we are talking about. In this project, there are a couple of technical innovations. It's one of the first as well that uses a so-called 1500 volt architecture. Without going too deep into technology, what is the benefit of increasing the voltage is that you decrease the amount of copper. So by having higher voltages, you of course save on the copper costs. And this is one of the first plants as well that uses this new technology. And next to the technological part and the cost benefits, this project is a milestone as well because it was the very first one in Spain where we were able to secure a long-term off-taker, being Statkraft, who bought for 15 years long our energy at a predetermined price. And the combination of the low production costs with this power purchase agreement make this very first subsidy-free project possible in the south of Spain. So whenever you develop projects, of course, when you want to keep the cost low, it is important that you keep a number of things under control. I will not go into details, but the main ones are that the costs for the land and basically the land is flat and that you don't have too many rocks in there, so you keep all your ramming costs low and that you have a very good grid connection available. So we found this site close to Sevilla on an existing waste dump where there was already a good grid connection point close to it, which helped us, of course, decreasing the connection costs and the land costs. And very important part, if you don't want to meet any resistance of the locals, is of course to involve people in the development. Because if you, as a foreign German company coming to Spain and you want to fill over the place with panels, of course you meet a lot of resistance. So it is very important that you include local workforce, local companies in there, and local authorities, which will give you in the end the permissions and the licenses to build such a project. Now allow me to dive a little bit deeper into what I've been explaining before, the levelized cost of energy. So this chart shows you basically what are the production costs when you invest into a renewable energy plant. The benefit of renewables, being wind or solar, is that you have basically no fuel. So the fuel falls from free out of the sky, being sunshine, or comes through the wind, which is for free as well. So basically, renewable energy projects are very capital intensive. So the exercise is, of course, to spread your investment, which is basically the yellow part, over the years. Of course, when operating solar or wind, you have a certain amount of operations and maintenance, which is the gray one. And then, of course, whenever you invest, most of the time you include someone financing. So in light gray, between the dark gray and the yellow, you see, of course, the interest of paying back the cost to the bank. And what is the real, let's say, milestone of this project? When you look into the costs, reaching production costs of 26, so close to 27 cents per kilowatt hour. So everyone who is involved today in energy production knows what are the market prices today. So you are basically talking about close to half price of what the wholesale markets are today. And that makes this kind of projects so attractive for us in the future. And it's real life, it's not planned in the future, that's happening today. So that is really why this project is so important for the development of the solar industry. Whenever comparing those costs with other technologies, if you would look into new hydro investments, we are talking like 13 cents per kilowatt hour. New nuclear, looking at new nuclear power plants like Hinkley Point at the moment being built in England, or Flamanville in the north of France or in the north of Finland, you see that the Hinkley Point, for instance, has a contract for difference of close to 11 cents. So, and we are with our solar technology at 2.5 to show the potential. New gas is at 8.5, new coal is a little bit lower at 6.3, and new wind is at 5. However, with wind and solar, it is important to notice that, of course, depending on where you are in Europe and how strong the wind is, and where you are in Europe and how strong the sun is, there is, of course, a spread. But the spread, this morning I just saw a newsletter saying that in Dubai, a new power purchase agreement has been closed for as low as $2. And the offshore wind today already is going subsidy-free as well. And the first onshore wind project has been contracted by IKEA 2 weeks ago in Finland, which is below those levels. So this is moving. And the other sources of energy, I'm sure they will only get more expensive because the fuel is getting more difficult to get. And of course, the fuel destroys our planet. Seeing that today I'm here in my light jacket in Austria and it's almost 20 degrees, shows us that there is something wrong with the climate. Huh? Okay. So basically, photovoltaics offer us a huge opportunity for mankind. It is today the cheapest source of energy that mankind has ever seen, and it is just a beginning. Where does the industry come from? So this is a kind of summary of all tenders that have been run around the world the last years, and levelized cost of energy. So you see that from 2010 we were close to 30 cents per kilowatt hour, and now we are down close to 4.5, even in Dubai, to 2 euros per megawatt hour, which is a huge revolution. And it's not, and it's still going down because module prices, who are the main driver in those costs, still keep decreasing, even if, in all honesty, the big decreases in prices that we have seen here will not go as steep anymore. But many experts believe that the panel prices will go as low as below 20 cents per watt peak, knowing that today we are close to 30. So we still have some margin in there. Okay. And the next revolution, next to basically the production costs, mainly driven by the costs of the cheaper modules, is a new business model that has been arising. Basically, it's called a power purchase agreement. So for people who are not really familiar with power purchase agreement, what is it? It is basically the renewable energy developer who directly sells his energy to the off-taker, being either a utility or being either directly a corporate. And this is done in two ways. You can or sell it physically, so mainly you sell the power physically to the existing net, or there are as well so-called virtual power purchase agreements, which are a kind of hedge where the seller and the off-taker agree to a kind of mechanism. So you determine the so-called strike price, and if the energy market is higher, the settlement is agreed between the seller and the off-taker, and if the market prices are lower, then the renewable energy producer pays the difference. So it's a kind of hedge, and this kind of models are very popular in the US, whereas in Europe we are more into physical PPAs today. Okay, but what are the benefits for a corporate to engage into power purchase agreements? Basically, it's volume. So many of those corporates have large targets, and whenever they engage in such an agreement, they can very fast make fast progress into their renewable energy targets. And on the other hand side, there is of course a financial benefit, because today renewable energy of power purchase agreements is getting cheaper than the market prices. And on top, they have direct access to the guarantees of origin, which is the ultimate proof that you basically buy and source renewable power. So there are so-called what I call deep green certificates, where you can really prove that your electricity comes directly from the producer. Okay, and the combination basically of the decreasing costs of installation together with the corporate PPAs are, in my opinion, the fuel for the future growth of the industry. So there is a very important initiative called RE100. So more than 120 in the meantime of the leading companies and corporates around the world have committed themselves to source 100% renewable energy. And those companies have created a huge demand. And this demand is basically the fuel, together with the PPAs, to move the volumes ahead. When you would look into the volumes, you would see that the market today in Europe is progressing around 1 gigawatt per year. In the US, it would be around 3 gigawatts. And the annual additional capacity that has been built last year, only solar would be 100 gigawatts. And wind, I think, I don't know the exact figure, but I would estimate it around 50 or 60 gigawatts. So you see that the corporates today are close to 5% of purchasing directly their power at the producer. But with the push of all those large companies, which are mainly data centers and energy intensive companies, we do expect that this growth of power purchase agreements will exponentially grow. Main barriers so far have been regulatory, especially here in Europe. We have the EU, but every market has developed its own system. And luckily, the EU has put in place a so-called Renewable Energy Directive lately, which is forcing the member states to go in a certain direction. And anchored into this Renewable Energy Directive is basically the obligation of each member state to facilitate those power purchase agreements. And there are other agreements that have been done there when it comes down to the renewable origin certificates, that more and more the markets will be interconnected. So in the future, every member state will need at least to have more than 10% of its production that should be available for export, which will increase, of course, the flexibility of all our nets around Europe. And the combination of those facts, supported by this drive of corporates, will create the next level of development and deployment of renewables. Okay, and now knowing that grid parity has arrived in Spain, of course the next question that would arise is how fast will it come to the north of Europe? So the Becquerel Institute, a very famous institute in Brussels, has done a study for Solar Power Europe, and it shows us basically that the cost decrease is going so fast that basically the disruption of cheaper solar energy is today already close to Paris. And with the minimum import price that has been lifted from China in September, the prices have decreased by more than 20%. So this opens new opportunities to go further north with cheaper solar power. And our expectation would be that even the North Finland would be in 2025 would have access to cheaper solar electricity. So the deployment now is going on full speed in Spain, in Italy, and in the south of France, and is now moving very fast north. So, and to give you an example, in Spain at the moment, the DSOs and TSOs have received more than 2.4 gigawatts of planning applications of developers that want to add subsidy-free solar. So no tender needed anymore, no need to wait. Same is happening in France. More and more people are not waiting to go into tenders, but start developing projects by selling the electricity directly to the off-taker. So this will really disrupt the market and go very fast. So, and as BayWa, for instance, we have already more than 800 megawatts under development that we have secured that will be built during the next 3 years, subsidy-free, to give you an example. Okay? Next to the development of the low-cost solar, in combination with the power purchase agreements, of course, there are a lot of additional disruptions that are helping us. More and more storage is entering into the market at lower prices, basically even forcing today gas power plants out of the market. Because more and more, the key problem of renewables is their intermittence, and that solar doesn't produce at night, and wind at some moments during the day is not blowing as well. But the combination with batteries or with hydrogen storage will solve that equation very fast. And today, when you see the amount of storage, more than 1 gigawatt of storage has been deployed last year as test projects. So everyone has certainly seen the projects of Elon Musk in Adelaide, in Australia, even in Belgium, Netherlands, Germany, in UK. Every day I see new announcements of storage, battery storage projects coming online. On top, we will have an increased need for energy, being the Internet of Things coming up, the 5G, and basically the digitalization of our society will lead to a higher increase. So basically there will be more need for electricity. And today Google, for instance, announced 2 weeks ago that they were 100% renewable, and even the Internet today with Apple, Amazon, Google, Facebook is today 100% renewable. If you can calculate the amount of certificates that justify that. So the digitalization of our economy is tackled in a renewable way, and that's a very positive development. And I will not enter into details, but the lady just before gave you a very nice introduction about what virtual power plants have in terms of potential. So we at BayWa believe as well that digitalization, combining all those technologies together with very clever IT and algorithms, will help us in future to create virtual power plants that will basically confirm that it is a myth thinking that renewables cannot power the society 100%. Fraunhofer Institute has released, I think a couple of months ago, a simulation on Germany showing that basically today the coal power plants can be switched off immediately, and with virtual power plants and with the capacity that is there is no power shortage today. So, and knowing that this technology is even evolving faster than we think, I think that the future in terms of deployment of renewables and handling the drawbacks, being the intermittence, will be tackled by the storage solutions. Okay? So, basically this was my presentation. So, and if there would be any questions, I would be very, very happy to answer them.
Thank you, Sven. A round of applause, please. That's a very interesting presentation. Thank you. I myself and my team have done a bit of work about LCOE around the world in different regions, and depending from where you are and how you look at the matter, the numbers are slightly different. But yes, definitely in Europe, new solar and onshore wind at least now beat existing fossil fuel generation.
And offshore as well.
And they beat it in terms of the running costs. So only the CO2 and fuel cost, stripping out all the rest. also because we're finally seeing the cost of carbon finally, raising. Any questions from the audience? Yeah, you'll have to catch this and speak in here.
Speak here. Okay, I am Ankit Agarwal from India. I'm working for a company who has been into power trading for last 8 years now. Right. My question is, with the announcement that you told us about, that Google has now announced that they are 100% renewable. Now, it's a kind of ironic that they have units all over the world, in US, Europe, India. I'm pretty confident that they don't purchase renewable energy in India. How ethical, or if I take it as a point, that purchasing power certificates, renewable energy certificates in Europe to offset their power usage in India without affecting the renewable climate, without affecting the renewable scenario in India, how good is it from the perspective of climate control in India, and that just to offset or have a name in Europe? That's my question.
So it's an excellent question. So of course it's a kind of political question as well. So I will not engage into politics. I will just try to share my experience being every day in contact with corporates such as Google or Amazon or IKEA. So basically every corporate that set itself a challenge of reaching 100% renewable is already mile ahead of the pack. So I fully agree on that approach to saying we want really to change things, and if we change things, we push the borders and we try to do things better. Of course, there's a way of proving that your energy you buy is 100% renewable, and you always will meet somewhere around the world countries that are not willing to participate or that do not have the regulatory framework in place. So the question is, what do? You wait, or you do extra things in other countries to compensate that? And the whole certificate system, under the condition, of course, that it's watertight. And today, in terms of certification, the European, I think the US, there is IREX in Asia as well at the moment. So it's getting more and more tight that you have no carbon leakage. And all those large corporates such as Google or Amazon, they are very careful on that no carbon leakage can be proved in their data. So they basically offset in countries such as India, where they are not able to, maybe on the short term, to meet the targets, but their plan is in every market to source 100% renewable, but it must be available. And I know that India is, after China, the number 2 in terms of deployment, and I'm extremely happy about that. So, and I'm convinced that as soon as all the announced projects, which India is today installing gigawatts and gigawatts of solar, that Google, under the condition that they have data centers there, which I do not know today, maybe if you look on their website, but if there are any physical data centers from Google owned in India, I suppose that they are covering it with local needs, which mean that they would source directly in India. But I have no knowledge whatsoever if Google has, I don't want to focus on one company, but looking at other ones, like for instance IKEA, which is a good customer of mine as well. They walk the talk, they install new stores in India. The first thing they do, they put solar on their roofs and they produce 100% what they need. So there are a lot of corporates walking the talk, and as always, there are always corporates doing big announcements, but where when you verify the figures, it's not always 100% accountable. So I don't want to make any statement which one it is. It's up to everyone to see which are those corporates.
And if I can add my 2 cents regarding your question. So as Sven said, there's 2 things to it, 2 sides to it. There's a corporate responsibility one, and Sven has outlined the situation there. Google can offset their emissions in other parts of the world by buying certificates, but that can only go up to a point. There's also a question of cost. As far as I know, we did some calculations, and in India, grid parity is further away in time in terms of, getting renewables, at least solar plus storage, to being equivalent to buying electricity from the grid. But there's one thing: in India, the industry is loss-making. The discoms make about a quarter, or the 20 to 25% loss a year. So if that gap is slowly eliminated and those losses can be passed on to the customers, then the transition will be quicker, and renewables will become competitive, more competitive compared to mainly coal, which is what mainly coal and hydro, which is what India lives on. Any other questions? I have a couple of questions myself. Can I? Yeah. So you mentioned two things about the Don Rodrigo project. One is that you have been using an old dump as let's say as the ground for the installation, and that's the site has had already a good grid connection. What is that? The impact approximately in percent on the LCOE of having those good starting points.
Yeah, I'm making a very rough estimation. If you look into, let's say this plant is like 175 megawatts. I've seen some costs in terms of grid connection that we need anyway to still build a whole substation. But if the main cost would be basically to draw a line from that substation to the next one. That is basically the big cost. And there, of course, this can kill or make a project. So it's very important when you look into locations for wind or for solar that you're, of course, not in the middle of the nature with no connection there, because then you need to bring all the infrastructure there. So there is a kind of let's say, balance you need to find to get as close as possible to the consumers, where there is already an existing infrastructure there where you can connect on to keep the costs low.
Yeah, and that is why grid connection actually takes out.
But roughly, I would say 10-15 kilometers from an existing substation would be a very good business case still.
Okay. Another question. So you talked about physical or virtual PPAs. In your case, it's a physical PPA.
Yes, it's a utility PPA. So basically,
okay, so
it's not.
Statkraft is by.
It's exactly. Because the Spanish market today is not very liquid, and it was the very first one, so everyone was afraid to be the first one. But we are already negotiating with many corporates directly at the moment, and it's a matter of months till the first corporate PPA over such a long term will appear in the Spanish market. So there is already smaller ones of 3-4 years that have appeared, because the Spanish were used to have a horizon of 5 years in their energy contracts, and the Spanish market was not very liquid. But now things are moving a lot, and I've seen first 10 years, I think Leche Pascual was one of the first one, a big milk producer, now engaging, and more RE100 companies are pushing because they've done it in other countries and they want to multiply it to Spain. So this will be a matter of months that the corporates will source directly.
Okay, I'll have a few questions. If you stay for the panel at the end, we can probably discuss that more. Maybe the last one. In this case, BayWa has taken on the risk of developing first and then managed to strike the PPA after, right?
That is correct, yes.
Okay. Thank you. A round of applause for Sven. Thank you. Very interesting. So, according to the plan, we have a coffee break. If you're interested, be sure to be back by 4 p.m. So in about 30 minutes or so. We have another couple presentations, and then we'll have a finishing panel session. Thank you. I think we need to start. We need to start. Yes. Welcome back, everyone. Next on is, let's see if I can pronounce your name right. Ole Langnis. Yes. Is that correct? Okay. Ole Langnis has a presentation that is from a project that's called C-Cells, a German mass market smart grid demonstrator, or pilot project, I should say. The title of the presentation is to the point because it says renewables are expensive unless seen in a cellular context. Ole, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much for the introduction. Yeah, I'm here on behalf of the C-Cells project. Actually, the team leader is ill, so I'm as a deputy team leader. I'm here. I have also own company called Ollie Systems. So I had a presentation this morning on the Innovate platform in the other hall on blockchain and energy. So I'm more than prepared also to talk to the cellular approach both and also on blockchain if you should be interested. So I'm going to talk about first what is the C-Cells project, then making this point, replacement of fossil power by renewables is expensive. Is that true or not? And then interlink the cellular approach into a CO2 reduced world. So what is C-Cells? C-Cells, the name basically connects two words, the cellular approach. So cellular means connect diverse, cellular organized energy infrastructures safely and efficiently. And at the same time, also enabling business. You should not only think into technological categories, but we are also thinking about business opportunities. So basically creating market flexibilities through different roles and operational spaces of action. So these two aspects are demonstrated in our showcase in the so-called Solar Arc. So this is in the southern part of Germany, in the states of Hesse, Bavaria and Baden-Württemberg, where we demonstrate several solutions, several cells, so to say, in different corners of our region. And C-Cells together means that we actually harmonize markets, grids, and safety through an infrastructure information system. So our project area, which is approximately a quarter of the entire area of Germany, as I said, is in the southern part of Germany, and which accommodates about 30% of the total generation of nuclear power up to now. But as you know, this is phasing out, will be banned by 2022. So there's really a kind of a problem that we need to substitute this generation by other sources. But here's also the good news. We have also 800,000 prosumers, so consumers who are at the same time already today are generating their own power with solar power and other renewable energy devices. So which is about it's more than 40% of the total number of prosumers in Germany. This area also features, on one hand, industrial load centers like Stuttgart, the Rhine-Neckar area, or also the greater Munich area. On the other hand, we have also a lot of rural regions which are not so densely populated, but which has already a high penetration of renewable energies, and which also features usually not a too strong grid and not a too meshed grid. This creates several areas where we have actually a surplus of renewable energy. So these areas are generating more power than actually they are consuming. So the surplus energy is often not effectively used because either the grid is not prepared to accommodate this surplus energy, or there's a lack in demand also and storage and trading incentives. Important part of our project is the connection to the political sphere. So we, as you might know, in Germany, we are a federal state, a federal country. So we are involving the federal ministers for energy in a dialogue series. Here you can see the minister of Baden-Württemberg, the environmental minister, who's in charge also for energy. And we have the next event in Bavaria and Munich on 1st of April. So it's not an April joke, it's a real event where we'll also meet other ministers, and where the need for the further development of the regulatory and political framework is discussed. So what does it basically mean if we talk about the cellular approach? We mean basically that there are, or in our project, there are 3 key instruments which should enable this cellular approach. Cellular means you have autonomous deciding units. So it's not about autonomy in the sense of you are getting independent from energy supply, but it's about making independent decisions really. And this more autonomy on the decentralized level is the very goal of our project. And to enable this, we need on one hand infrastructure information system. We then also have an instrument where the monitoring and the balancing between the different layers of the grid, the distribution grid as well as the transmission grid, is automatically controlled against today very manual control of the grid. And as a third very key component, we have also regionalized markets for energy and flexibility. So what is the infrastructure information system? Basically, it's a distributed database where we put together all data which is relevant really to market efficiently flexibility. Because often today, neither the customers know which flexibility is needed in market purposes on a local level or on a regional level, nor do they know whether there are, for instance, congestions in certain areas of the grid. And to put this information together, and on the other side also the grid operators don't know where are the potential flexibilities offered by customers or even also small generators. And so we put together this information in our infrastructure information system, and it doesn't mean it is a large central database, but rather it is a registry where the supply of the information from the distributed databases is organized. And it comprises not only information, but it comprises also the communication system itself. So how actually to communicate to the distributed devices. And it actually also comprises actuators where you basically can control also loads as well as generation. So this all follows, if you know the smart grid architecture model, this follows also this logic of the smart grid architecture model, where you have these 5 key layers, from the component layer to the communication layer to the information layer to the function layer, and then of course the business layer. That's why it's called C-cells, right? Now I'm coming to the point of the cascaded process for coordination of system operation. You might know that in Germany we have actually 900 grid operators. So we have a very diverse system of distribution grids and transmission grids. There are only 4 transmission grids only, but there are more than 800 distribution grids originating from the development of the grid. So, and the coordination of these different distribution system operators are at this point done in a very manual way. So it means they are sending basically faxes to each other, or they're calling. Obviously, this is not anymore possible if you're not anymore controlling only a few hundred devices and a few hundred assets, but if you want to control some hundred thousands or even million of assets, then it needs to be, the whole process needs to be automated. And so that's why we are implementing this automated process, where the whole exchange of information as well as of action is digitalized between all levels of the transmission and distribution grid, down to even the customer and the decentralized generation. Actually, this is a very painful process, because still in Germany today, the system operators are more in a way organized as a workshop, not really organized as an industry. So it's also a paradigm shift which we need to implement here. And to make this enable this process, we're introducing the so-called traffic light model, where depending on the grid status, we have there's the green light, or there's the yellow light, or the red light, or even, which we're not hoping will be the case, that there's even a blackout, so that would be the black light. You see, black light doesn't really fit, but still we call it the black light. And this means that the system operators have different possibilities to balance the system. In a green situation, all the systems are quite well balanced. In the yellow phase, the system operators will already purchase on a market additional flexibility to balance the system. In the red case, the system operator will take over the full control of the market. We will be not anymore working. You might ask, what is the blue color? The blue color is if you are building up again the grid from the blackout to the green phase. Coming now to, as a third key element, to marketplaces. We see different marketplaces. We see on one side peer-to-peer markets, so really on the local level, that prosumers are trading with each other directly. Then we see on the other side is centralized trading for markets or system purposes, where we add more flexibility from the local and regional level, and where they can participate in the centralized trading system. So this is a supplement to the existing system, whereas the peer-to-peer market is a real new system. And then on the third point, when it comes to this yellow phase of the grid, the status of the grid, where grid operators need to purchase flexibility to balance the grid, that they have a central purchasing platform where they can actually buy in then flexibility. So all of these examples we are actually implementing in our project area. So this is a really huge project. It's a 4-year project. We are now almost in the midterm of the whole project. So 2 years has been already passed. We are more than 50 partners. It's a 100 million euro project, so it's really a huge one. It's one of 5 projects actually which are implemented in Germany. It's called in the framework of the so-called Syntec program. The others are also here, somewhere in the hall, also distributed. You might find them as well. It's a mixture of manufacturers as well as grid operators, as well as also new market players like real estate developers, for instance, and also startups. And of course, we have also involved science. And this also, of course, happens in real spots and places. So it's in 32 cells we are implementing here these technologies, and these cells will then contribute and will be interacting through the different types of markets, and they will benefit from the cascade, as well as they can use also the infrastructure information system. So renewables to replace fossil power is expensive. Well, it depends. If you're owner of these assets, then of course it's expensive, because it will devaluate your asset once the new assets are coming. So yes, it's expensive, but we think that in a cellular-based system, where also more new actors are coming into place and providing them with new business opportunities, there's actually the way really to make it less expensive and even fully cost competitive. So the whole setup of our present framework is really based on optimizing the current centralized system. So it's quite obvious that we need to rearrange here our system, and we are in good belief that the cellular approach would be here a good way to do that. Because the cellular infrastructure will reduce complexity. It's only a few hundred assets again, or a few thousand might be, which you need to control in one cell, and it's not a million ones. So it's again almost the same task that it is now with some thousand assets in a centralized world. It increases system resilience because in the case of blackout, then still you have some autonomy to control the individual cells. It minimizes overall cost of energy infrastructure compared with alternative greenhouse gas solutions. It utilizes decentral resources, and not only in a way that you need to pay for them, but really to make them bring them as an active member of the system, both in a commercial way, but also in a way of supporting the grid when the grid gets unstable. So the responsibility is also going to the decentralized level more and more, and it encourages broad participation, private involvement. So for the energy transition, we need more and more stakeholders, because we not only, in the case of Germany, we not only need 2 million prosumers, but we need 4, 5, 6 million prosumers, so that we can replace more and more of the centralized power. And it integrates a broad spectrum of different cell characteristics. It's for us important that it's not one fits all solution. We will encounter more and more diverse solutions. And what we need to create is a framework which allows to accommodate these differences and diversity. So C-Cells is running. Actually, our next run is the marathon run in Stuttgart on May 26, 2019. So it's not only a venture of technology and of commercial, but it's also a venture of friendship and doing things together with human beings. So that's why we're also doing some sport events sometimes together. Thank you for your attention. I'm really keen to your questions and comments.
Sorry about that. Thank you all for the presentation. Really interesting. Any questions from the audience? No questions. I have one quick question. You mentioned as one of the markets in C-Cells, it's a peer-to-peer market. So you see where I'm going to. What's the technology underpinning that? Are you using anything that resembles blockchain? Have you considered blockchain?
Absolutely, we are using basically blockchain, and the business case for the time being here is that from 2021, more and more of the public supported renewable energy plants will be phased out from the German renewable energy law, and for those devices you would need alternative marketing opportunities, and that's the reason why we're implementing this based on blockchain.
I see. Thank you. There's a couple of questions there. That's very good. Go.
You mentioned that there are 900 DSOs in Germany, and you had presented good arguments for decentralized cellular approach. So are 900 DSOs enough, or is it the correct number, or how would you relate it to the cell concept that you presented?
Well, I mean, the DSOs are basically only providing the grid infrastructure, and we will need the grid infrastructure also in the future. I think it's an asset here. It's good because you can accommodate much better diversity. If we would only have one DSO, he would seek for homogeneous solution here. So I think the 900 ones are okay. But I can't say. I mean, in the future you might think about like closed quarter grids, right? I mean, where you only have like that might come outside of the public grid, but the public grid, I think, this remains to this number, or we might even integrate some of them.
Hello, I had a question because there are two kind of producers in the market that might market their additional power that they don't use, being private consumers and corporates. How big is the share between both in your project? Is the project more targeting the large consumers and the large producers, or are the small producers included as well?
We actually we have both. I can't give you numbers in what is the share of those two parties, but we have involved, for instance, the airport of Stuttgart because it could provide a lot of flexibility. They also run own generation. They have electrical buses, for instance. They have not only on the field buses are all now electrically based, so the charging is an interesting case, right? But on the other hand, we have also conversion areas. In Germany, a lot of the old military areas are now converted into living areas, and there we have a large case in Mannheim where 7,000, I think 7,000 new inhabitants will be involved. So it's huge. There will be like about 2,000 assets involved in that case, and it's more private than private households.
Because do you have this kind of so-called meterstrom projects in there? So where today you cannot, for instance, if you live in one building block, sell your excess power to your neighbor. With the blockchain today, this is possible. Are these kind of applications considered in your model as well?
Actually, right now, because when we designed the project, the Mieterstrom model was not established legally. It remains to be seen whether we will use that. I see there's some opportunity, but we haven't discussed it finally with the partners.
Is C-Cells also incentivizing new actors to enter the market, and how's the process of a new prosumer? How can he connect with the C-Cells model?
Absolutely. I mean, what we want to create is blueprints how you actually can generate more flexibility, how you can provide more commercial opportunities to consumers, and also to give them also more responsibility for grid, for instance. So this is absolutely the core of the project, because otherwise you cannot do autonomous decisions, right? And actually, that's also why we have a strong participation element. So we are actually approaching citizens in the different cells and actually trying to motivate them also to take part beyond what is anyway already established in these cells as generation.
And what are your main competitors? Is Sonnen, the Sonnen business model, one of your competitors, or is it targeting a different area?
No, I mean, you know, this is a public supported project, so we have not really a competitor. I would say the Sonnen model would nicely fit into it. Actually, Tenet, who's also partner of Sonnen, is also partner with us, so we align each other. And again, I mean, I think diversity is key in the future for so it's not about this system is right or that system is right. I think we need all, right?
Another question popped into my mind listening to the last one. Do you have any aggregators as partners in the project? And aggregators, virtual power plants, people that already have a pool of installed capacity available and have, let's say, the technology to activate it on demand.
Right. I mean, on one hand, of course, the grid operator, and some of them are even integrated utilities still. So they are kind also of aggregator, so because they're aggregating then the demand or the flexibility, what they need. But we have also operator of a virtual power plant, Next Kraftwerke, who's then also doing the regulating power.
Which is, I didn't have the chance to look at all the logos, but yeah. That's who I was referring to. Any other questions? All right, thank you, Ole.
Okay.
Big round of applause. So our next Next speaker is Chief Engineer at Danish TSO EnergyNet. His name is Anders Bavnoy Hansen. I'm hoping that I got your various names correct. His presentation is about the North Sea Wind Power Hub, which I think is one of the most ambitious projects in offshore wind, surely in Europe and probably around the world. So, Anders, the floor is yours.
Thank you. At Energinet, we are TSO for both electricity and gas, so I'll also in presentation give some aspects on power to gas in this North Sea Wind Power Hub. Looking into the North Sea Wind Power Hub, it's actually based on the very ambitious targets that this Paris 2015 agreement set up, going beyond below 2 degrees temperature increase. And they are also forming this into E and G scenarios towards 2040. So it's setting up that you need very large amount of renewable electricity. And producing all this renewable electricity, the North Sea is an abundant resource for wind power offshore. So it has to be to fill its brick in this game. And looking into scenarios going towards this European ambition, there might be need from 70 to 150 gigawatt installed offshore energy in the North Sea towards 2040. So it's really an increase because it's 7 to 15 times the capacity we are looking into today. So it makes sense to really look into how could you do most cost efficient with this last building out in the North Sea. If you look out in the North Sea, this is showing the water depth in the North Sea. We know there's a number of large areas close to shore where you can connect with AC lines and getting into the countries. But there's also huge resources out here in further distances, and that's a situation where you can't do traditional AC lines. You need HVDC lines, getting more costly to get into shore. So there's two legs actually on this project. One is really planning regional integrations of large-scale wind in the whole North Sea, doing planning of interconnectors combined with areas where you collect all this wind power. That's the one leg. And the other one is really exploring a concrete hub and spoke project where you build, you might say islands, you might say hub and spokes. It could be sand, it could be steel, but where you have some points out there collecting a huge amount of wind powers and sending onto shore. So we're talking about hubs up in 20, 30 gigawatt collecting wind power and sending to shore. And the partners in the projects, it's TenneT and Gasunie, I think, from the Netherlands, and Energinet from Denmark, and Port of Rotterdam from the Netherlands as well. So a little bit more about this grid connection system and the whole deal of how to make it more cost efficient to use this North Sea. Today a lot of connection is made AC based, but you can go up to 100 kilometers with this. So it's for close to shore, a quite cost efficient solution. If you're going about this distance or more far shore, you today go in a single HVDC solution. Traditionally, you build a wind park, you build a transformer, HVDC, so that's single project planned and it's more costly. If you go into this hub and spoke project, you build a large island or platform out there, and then you're through the decade or even more than a decade building more and more wind power, and your connection goes to different countries, not necessarily one country, but different countries, so you get this interconnection value and you get some large-scale solutions. One thing also essential is that technology is developing, so this island might will stay for decades, but you just connect new type of offshore wind technology, so you're not so locked in the technology. You're open for more innovation in system solutions. So this is the concept to do this. Then, of course, what's the layout? Yeah, of course, it could be sand-based, it could be based on steel. It seems when we look at the economy, sand-based might make sense actually, because the technology from extending harbors and all this is the same technology you use here. But it's only if you're in an area with not so a deep area. And if you go out to this Doggerbank area you might say in the middle of the North Sea, as I showed you this map, it's only 10, 15 meters in the middle of the North Sea. Long time ago, actually, it was an island, but so you can build on this and build sand constructions out there, and then interconnect huge amount of wind power to this. We might think on North Sea as well, nothing is happening out there, so it's more simple than onshore wind, but it's not the situation. From onshore wind, we know all this neighbors to windmills, it's an issue, but out in the North Sea, there's a lot of activities that we have to make in. So when we do this calculation of cost for different areas, we also have to look at all these different activities as zones, military zones. So if we use this area, we have to look what's the cost for moving this area and put it on the levelized cost of energy. There's also some nature with birds. What's the cost of disturbing? This is very hardly to calculate cost of this, but you have to be aware of this nature cost and protected habitats. Then there's a lot of shipping roads, minor shipping roads, but also major shipping roads. And if you want to change the shipping road, you're going to pay for it. So it comes back to money, levelized cost of energy, and oil and gas platforms, fisheries zones, a lot of cables and piles and pipes, also for oil industry, and also some sand mining areas. So we take all this information and do a spatial study, combine it with the water depth and the annual wind production, and then you get a levelized cost of energy for the whole North Sea area. And the zone that has been in focus, it's up to 50 or 55 meters deep, so going above here, it's not really interesting because then you need floating solutions for wind power. So this area, and then you get into a levelized cost of energy if you use this hub and spoke solution. And this report is not published yet, so until it's really finalized and published, we cannot put the cost of energy, but this is analyze what's the cost of energy if you use a hub and spoke project. So we're talking cost that goes, well, not down to the level you have an onshore, but mostly down to the level that you have for AC connections. So you get this possibility to use the whole North Sea area as a resource with a reasonable cost. I think if you go really close to where you can use AC cables, it's cheaper. So this is for the hub and spoke project. You have a more homogeneous cost for the whole zone. So this is, well, the first spatial study showing it really does make sense to go this way. It gives a planning issue. It gives a new concept with a lower cost. But it's a long-term project. I will also say a few words about power to gas, because if we build so much wind power out there, and we also build a lot of solar and onshore wind, we definitely go into situations where more than 20 or 30% of the time there's abundant production of electricity out there. So it's really a challenge. And power to gas is a solution discussed a lot. You might be familiar with electrolysis. You take electricity and produce hydrogen, and you can use this hydrogen for further refining to liquid fuels, for aviation, and also for backup capacity when the wind is not blowing there. So power to gas is an essential backup. And then I would like to come back to this. We looked at the cost of transporting electricity versus transporting hydrogen. So if you have here close to Dogger Bank and you want to go to shore, the cost for transporting hydrogen is 1/6 or 1/5 of the cost for HVDC. So if you anyway are going to use some hydrogen onshore, it might make sense out on an island to produce this and electrolysis and then do a further refinery onshore. So different concept is analyzed, and just to show one concept, there's a lot of concepts actually, where you're out on this island, introduce electrolysis or power to gas, not as it's a supplementing solution. We still have the electrical connection, but it's a supplemental. So if you got low prices in the whole region, you start running electrolyzer, and you put this hydrogen in a pipe into, this is somewhere shore, this is example is for Denmark, but it could very well be for the Netherlands with the hydrogen industry. In this example, you take this hydrogen, you can store it in a gas salt cavern. So you got the storage capacity here, and then you combine this hydrogen, the CO2 from biogas, where you today just take away the biogas or the CO2. If you combine this in a catalysis process, you could produce biofuels for aviation. But you could also use this hydrogen for producing backup capacity. So there's a lot of cluster industries you can put onto this. And just to give you an amount of the storage capacity in a salt cavern is just a hole in the ground where you can store hydrogen under pressure. So this is a hole. It's always difficult to draw a hole, but this is a hole down in the ground, a salt cavern. If you compare this to a Tesla wall, known for most people, you actually go more than 20 million Tesla walls to compete with this capacity. Not to say that we don't need Tesla walls. We definitely need this for storing shortly and for grid services using batteries. But this is a way you can store, you might say, a whole spring with a lot of production of wind out in the North Sea, where you just have abundant resources. So we think this is a very essential part of the solution, combining power to gas with this international interconnectors. A little bit about the time plane for the timeline, because this is a long-term vision actually. So we think this hub and spoke project we're going to 2030 and even beyond this. So we're looking now on spatial study and looking into making the first demonstration project, and then the big run-out scale real is beyond 2030. So it's a long horizon project. And I think by this there might be a question. Or
any questions?
Hey, so the questions about the financial viability, I think you said that transporting the hydrogen is 1/6 of the cost. But other than that, I think I didn't hear anything about the financial viability. Maybe I missed it, but like, is it going to be financial viable by, like, in the end of the planning horizon, like after 2030? Is it going, because like everything will change, I guess maybe you can elaborate on that?
yeah. If we look at the cost of these technologies today, in 2030, electrolyzer technology, what you say, alkaline, and PEM is some less mature actually, but it can be cheaper. So, but if you produce hydrogen, I think it's 4 times more expensive than natural gas, even higher. So it's definitely quite expensive. But if you look at the market out there for biofuels, if you look at the green methanol market today, you're paying, I think it's 500 euro per metric tons of methanol. So it's significantly more expensive than traditional gasoline. It's because there's a market pool out there. There's some bindings on blending second generation fuels at the European level. There's a lot of actors that want green methanol because they got customers that had green. So there's really a high paying market for this. So if you take not this offshore, but if you take onshore wind today and go this way, you can almost meet the market. It's very narrow. There's not additional payment for uncertainties and research and innovation. But it's not a large need for support, actually, more a risk diversification. And what we also see investors in wind power, they're looking very much into power to gas, and it's because they're looking for hedging. They're just so afraid that there'll come this drop of prices when they have invested in a large wind power park. So they're looking into hedging, building power to gas. So they really would love this installations to be. So high paid market here if you go for the green methanol market. But still, technologies are, well, innovated for the coming decades. So a narrow market now and a large market beyond 2030 where you almost reach the fossil parity. And also, if you had took the example from Rotterdam, there might be a lot of industries that wanted to use hydrogen directly because they have a lot of industry with hydrogen.
Thank you, Anders. No other questions? All right, thank you. An applause for Anders, please. So up is a short panel discussion. We'll have 30 minutes or so of chat just to ideally close our session talking about low-cost renewables. And I'll invite my panelists on stage. You can stay on. Anders, Sven, Homer is coming as well. We will have to share microphones. Yes. So yeah, you can sit there. I'll sit somewhere here. I'll see if I can face you. All right. Thank you so much for your time, for your presentations. Thanks for being with us today. Thank you to the audience for resisting throughout the session. I'll probably go back to introducing myself because the audience has changed in the meantime. My name is Jean-François Segalotto. I work for IDC, which is an analyst firm, essentially. I work for IDC Energy Insights, which is the business unit that looks at technology across the energy and utilities value chain. And specifically, I myself look at energy utilities across EMEA, so Europe, Middle East, and Africa. Maybe, guys, you want to do a quick round of introductions yourself, maybe saying where you're from and what brought you here in terms of what you presented. Of course, it's obvious for Anders and maybe Ole, but the other ones haven't.
So my name is Sven Goethaus. I'm from Belgium, and I work for a German company, BayWa, who is a renewable energy project developer, and I've been presenting a renewable energy project in Spain, which is today at lower cost as traditional technologies.
So my name is Romain Ver. I'm from France and working at a French TSO, gas TSO, GRT Gas, and I presented a smart gas grid project.
Well, I was already introduced, right? My name is Ole Langnes. I'm a deputy team leader of C-Cells, and I'm also running my own startup on blockchain-based energy management systems called Ollie Systems.
Yeah, my name is Anders Baunhøj, Chief Engineer in Energinet, working very much with total system integration and the more long-term vision, and Denmark had this ambition being fossil independent 2050, so there's a lot of analysis towards this transition, and North Sea Wind Power Hub is definitely a part of this renewable energy source we're looking into.
Thank you. We can maybe use the other one. So, as a quick reflection, just as a background to our chat here and where we come from, it's some of the concepts I've introduced earlier in the section. I'm going to repeat those for the sake of kickstarting our discussion. Now, the mantra or the obsession of the renewable industry, especially in Europe over the past 20 years, has been with cost, right? And the mantra was really, we need to get cheaper and we need to get at par with existing with existing generation. And once we get to grid parity, that is the cost at the point of emission into the grid of electricity generated with renewable sources will be the same at par with the cost of electricity generated with, let's say, whatever thermal technology will be the same, then now we're talking. Then it will be interesting. Now that moment has come, clearly, and depending where you look and the perspective you have and the technology you're looking at, that moment might also have been surpassed in certain regions. We are moving from feed-in tariffs and subsidies to bidding. If you look at Cleve Hill is is a monster, is a 350 megawatt solar farm in the south of the UK, which is set to produce some of the lowest cost electricity in the country without any subsidies. Of course, the farm is massive, but still it's the UK, so not really the sunniest place on earth, I would say. Once again, wind and solar PPAs are spreading, in an uneven fashion, I would say, across Europe. We've talked about Spain with BayWa. When it comes to wind, Germany and the Netherlands are also cases in point. There's another factor that generating through fossil fuels is becoming more and more expensive. Fuel costs are going up, the CO2 prices are going up, which makes so that the cost of renewables is now lower than the running cost in many cases of the fossil fuel power plants. And when I say running cost, it's really just the CO2 and fuel cost. And I think that's a big achievement, it's a big milestone. And finally, by our own estimation, I think grid parity is now is going to materialize soon for small-scale solar plus storage systems, which is very interesting in terms of not so much grid defection, but load defection, prospectively. So the message is the cost of generation is no longer the issue. We are already there. But we need to translate low-cost renewables into cheap electricity for the end user. And that's not always the case yet, right? So to do that, we need to change some of the things in between. We need to change how electricity is transported, is distributed. We need to sort of modify what TSOs and DSOs are allowed to do. We need to change some of the market rules. So the question is now how we translate low-cost renewables into cheaper and reliable electricity for the end users. So how we translate grid parity in a way into price parity or a price advantage for the consumer. Having said that, I have questions for you, finally. I'll stop chatting. So I have a first general question, which is really to set the stage. We often hear that with current market models and mechanisms, high penetration of renewable energy wouldn't be efficient or wouldn't work at all. And we hear of variable supply is the first objection, erratic prices, negative prices, high risk, lower incentives to invest in generation, all those things. My question for you is, what are, from your perspective, some of the key steps for a cost-effective transition to a high renewable energy generation mix in Europe? Maybe, Anders, you want to go first?
I think if I should mention just one thing is cost of producing wind and solar, but the real issue is what's the value when you produce it. If you don't have the flexibility in the system, you lose the value actually. So one very essential thing is this, what the buzzword sector coupling really, and power to gas is one part of sector coupling, power to heat is another part of sector coupling. So really getting all this flexible consumption combined with this production. So this is really a key area, otherwise we're definitely not going to make this transition that Europe has an ambitious fund. So it's sector coupling and the things you can't electrify, use, could be renewable gas, could be hydrogen, use this for these purposes, heavy transport, aviation, and all this. So combining the sector coupling is very essential for success, and then you get the needed storage for very low cost compared to batteries. So not to say we're not going to have batteries, we need this, but we need the sector coupling to get the flexibility.
I think it's fair that you both guys are talking, because we already talked 20 minutes, so I'm keen also to hear your views on that.
So for a gas operator, the coupling between energies is very important, and we have, as a grid operator, as a gas grid operator, to make improvements in the fluidification of the flow management, because we used to say that gas system has an important storage capacity, and that's true because we have storage plants, because we have the ability to work with a high pressure level, but this capacity is not well distributed, and we have to remove barriers because of the pressure, because of the difference of pressure between low pressure grid and high pressure grid. So we have to work with new equipments, with new devices, as reverse flow units, as we deployed it in France. And also, if we do that, so we have invested a lot in order to be sure that for each entry points for providers, for the markets, we can bring gas to each customers. So we have to do the same thing in a decentralized system, because in a centralized system, the production is in TSO, is injected into TSO. In France, decentralized system, the injections are into DSO. So if we want to today work with biomethane, but tomorrow with hydrogen, with power to gas, with syngas, we have to make these improvements into our grids in order to be able to give an answer to another energy grids.
So many things have already been said, of course. Maybe what I would add next to the sector coupling is we have basically gone through transition, as you have mentioned, bringing down the costs. The second one is integrate renewables in the energy markets and in the mechanisms. That is the step we are in at the moment. We started first, of course, as renewables to disturb the market because we brought negative prices, and we shake an order where it was fairly easy, a nuclear power plant, base load, and simple. But today we have to manage basically the fluctuation of the production and integrate this into the energy markets. So this is a first step. And we have the benefit now of being more cheap, but on the other hand side, our politicians have not evolved with this new market. So I think that there is a need. So companies are already doing this with sector coupling, but our politicians and regulators have to take a look like 10 years ahead. What do we want to achieve? Where we want to go? How can we integrate all that? And very important, in order to have the citizens on board, we need to involve them in this energy revolution. So this means that everyone is becoming an actor and not a passive buyer, because everyone starts producing his own energy, having his battery, having his electrical car, having his smartphone. So there is a very interesting universum around that if you, through digitalization, and I think that's another important development, the digitalization, in my opinion, is the key, together with the right market mechanisms, to move our system from centralized to decentralized. And on the other hand side, I'm not a big fan of very big over-regulation, but on the other hand side, the governments have got good tools in hand to move the things forward. Give you an example, today there shouldn't be any new house being built that is not energy positive. If a new warehouse is built, it's a shame not putting solar panels on it and to use it as a kind of generation. So I think that today many people are obliged to isolate their houses, but we don't think about the generation potential. So all these kind of puzzle pieces coming together with a strong, let's say, harmonized on European level regulation and interconnection, together with digitalization, I think that's the way forward, even if it's a massive and complex exercise. So.
Okay, it's nice to say that, because my next question is really about how the market should evolve and the rules. And you've spoken of market steps and regulatory drag. What is, according to you, the number one change in how the market works, so that we can look positively at our very ambitious decarbonization target, and we can aim at a high renewable energy power system that also produces cheap electricity for the customers. So you mentioned a few, but if you were to pick one market change, what would that be?
I would say create a level playing field where there is zero subsidies to the polluting people, and there is a right price for carbon. I think that would be one of the biggest steps ahead. And on the other hand side, a European energy market where all the rules for everyone are the same, creating enough scale and interconnection.
That's right. And do you think we are getting there in terms of at least the carbon pricing? Do you see that happening in the forecasts say that very soon the carbon price will be to a point that without capacity markets, a lot of the, let's say, dirty generators would be out of the market, or very near so.
I'd say realistically, until last week, the carbon prices were going through the roof, but 2 days ago they fell down to the level they were before. So we were in a kind of super enthusiast mood. But we need to be realistic that today fossils still get 5 times the amount of money than all the renewables together. So there is still some power and some forces that are defending basically their survival. And this needs to change, and this is a political thing that citizens need to push through. And that's basically the beginning of the whole equation.
And we, at least in Europe, have a market for emissions. Think
yes.
of the rest of the world. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Anyone else? Anders, you were...
I think when it comes to market solution, there's I'm not saying an elephant in the room, but something smaller, another animal in the room. And this is about regional pricing going up if you have grid congestion. We made a simulation of a local feeder on some houses, fully electrified, putting on electric vehicle for charging, putting a heat pump instead of a gas, putting solar on the roof, get the ability to invest in batteries. So it's really extremely electrified road. And actually, if you put a smart grid on this and regulate it with a dynamic tariff, you could handle this road without reinforcing the grid. So this is, whoa, what's happened? But if you simulate it without this, you had more than 300% of overload. So it's just because you got distributed so many muscles out there. You got batteries, you got flexible charging of the electric vehicle, you get some flexibility in the heat pump. So you can really manage it. So we need a smart grid. That's one thing. But then you come into a situation where the price might go up and down in different areas, and that we could learn from US here because they're going quite far about nodal pricing and looking into distribution nodal pricing, and think this is the tool. When we're not really talking so much about this in Europe because prices are changing in different areas, but we need to discuss this if we need to have physics closer to market. But it's political, it's a dangerous thing to talk about. But if you really want to be Europe in the leading Liga, we should discuss this. It might not be necessary for the consumer. The small consumer might have a more zonal pricing. But for the large industry with power to gas and all this, it's essential that to place some of the production of electrolyzers in an area where you have all the production of wind. So you need this market signal. So this is about pricing. We're going to work with this.
So I agree with you. It's really about putting incentives and price signals in the local markets. That is where investment need to be done. So as to link the prices and investment signals. I agree with you. Yes.
I think also I would like to stress, renewable energies are presently already fully cost competitive. And if you even consider that we are in a carbon-constrained world, then we are more than cost competitive. Actually, we are using a resource we are not allowed to use, and we underestimate the value of that. So, but even if we are not estimating the value of the CO2, we are already fully cost competitive. So I think this needs to be stressed first. And okay, now to your question, what is really needed? I think we need more innovation, and you can foster this by really doing innovative regulatory zones, so to say, right? Sandboxing is the English word for it. I would call it in German like innovative balance groups, right? Where you would allow new stakeholders really to do innovations. Now we are restricted in Germany by more than 10,000 regulations. They certainly have all a reason which occurred over the last 100 years when this fossil-based system was established. And it's certainly very efficient for that purpose. But we now need different system. So we need to allow also to test new technologies. But we are not able to test these new technologies at this point because we are at each and every point we are hindered to do innovations. But we need to do innovations to survive, right? And so that's for me absolutely key, to have like innovative balance groups, to have sandboxes. And I think the European Parliament has already established in this regulation, this allowance, for instance, that in quarters you have like this Mieterstrommodelle, yes, so you can supply directly customers. So that's a very first tiny step, but we need to go along much more into that, right?
I agree with the regulatory sandboxes, and I think there's governments and states in Europe that are ahead of the curve compared. One that comes to mind is actually Denmark. But where do you believe it is more fertile, or I should put it in another way, where do you believe the regulator is the most forward-looking presently across Europe? He's opinionated
Yes.
on this.
For all precision, I'm Belgian, but Netherlands, I would say, because they have an interesting setup with the TSO, who is in two countries, in Germany and in Netherlands, and who is a lot involved in offshore. So they are very open, and I think the Danish as well. So Dutch and Danish, I would say, are the ones that are open, and they have been testing as well this kind of let's say, involving the citizens with this cooperation models in Denmark as well. I think that's an important one as a thing as well, that you need to involve the people and not the politicians say it goes that way. We need to give back the energy transition back to the people so they can invest in their own nets around them, in their own batteries, in their own solar panels, and take their power in their own hands.
And once again, it links back to giving the proper signal to the people to be investing in in distributed energy resources.
I think also more recently, also in Switzerland, we have seen some interesting development where there's anyway a tradition that in the federal system they try to engage more local people, local communities. So a lot of power is also based in the local communities and in the cantons and so on. So there's a tradition that, and you can see this also in regulation now, that they allow these energy communities now also to be established. But I think really regulation is, I mean, they always look at the static efficiency, right? What is there, the status quo, how you can deal with that most efficient. So the whole dynamics is gone, right? And so basically regulation always fails to incentivize innovation and to incentivize dynamics, right? So I couldn't really say this is a good regulation or this is a bad regulation. We need to have some regulation-free zones. So, and then once we have this, then we can establish new rules where there's a fair play, right? But otherwise, I mean, if you talk to children and you leave them in the sandbox, I mean, you don't tell them, okay, here you have the directive on what's the poisonous of this.
You are the DSO, you cannot buy storage.
Exactly. I mean, the only rule which is there is don't put the don't punish you, don't hurt your neighbor, right? That's the only thing. So we need this basic rule, right, in the sandboxes, and beyond that, leave us, right, and then we can do really good things.
And looking in the world where most of the innovations are happening today, I think there is one region in the world, which is California, that jumps out immediately with Silicon Valley, with the Amazons, the Facebooks, and everyone who has been pushing on the corporate PPAs. There, Tesla has come, the battery super Tesla factory. California was the first going huge with solar. But they are now somehow coming at the limit as well. However, they got the courage to go for 100% renewables target as one of the first states in the world. So I think that's clearly a kind of place to have a look at. And what comes down to this Silicon Valley kind of mentality is there's no rules and please do your own thing and try to find something new. Huh?
So in many ways, it's the places where the energy or the generation mix has been taken to the extremes in renewable wise. So there's big wind contribution in the Netherlands, in Denmark, a problem of curtailment, and TenNet knows very well that, as well as EnergyNet.
It comes to my mind also a very recent example that in Estonia, the TSO put all customer data on the blockchain, right? And you can think, well, this is really enabling something, right? I mean, and why should the TSO keep the data? I mean, it's a monopoly. It's basically anyway, it's public ownership, right? Why should it be really in the hands of the people who want to act with that, right? So I think this is really enabling something. But we are in many countries we don't do this. I mean, we are constantly only have these 10,000 regulations in mind. Why we could not do, and this is all an only excuse to cementicize what we are, the structures we still have, right? So it's really painful.
Okay, so my next question, and maybe we can poll the audience to see if there's any question from the audience right now at this point. No questions. So it's interesting we delved on regulatory drag, or regulatory crystallization, I would say. Because my next question was actually taking a step back. What would be I had, my first question was, what was the number one, let's say, thing to change to allow a high renewable energy, cost-effective power system? What is apart from regulation, let's stop the regulatory blame game, which I understand is a big issue. What is the number one obstacle to getting there right now? So let's look out 10 years, 12 years, 2030. What is the major roadblock into the decarbonization of the power sector? And not decarbonization per se, but a wise decarbonization that keeps prices low and the supply secure.
I think if you look into a situation where the cost of renewables are going down and going very narrow to the cost of fossils, there's a lot of customers really requesting for renewable energy because they've got other customers that want this. You could take Apple looking for green energy to say our data center are based on renewables, but they're now looking also for backup, green backup. So they say, oh, we have this wind farm, this is what we got the electricity from. Then their customers might say, hey, well, what are you going to do when you don't have the wind farm running? What's your solution? Are you cheating us and us? So we're really looking for not a wind power PPA, but another PPA where you could get true green. It might be more expensive than the traditional one, but it's not really an issue because the value to go out to the market to say our product is totally green, it's much more worth. So we don't necessarily have to come real down to grid parity. But if you're quite close, you start up with quite a big market. But then we need the market solutions that could deliver true energy through an international grid. So how do you cope with this? You got certificates. Well, people don't really believe in the green certificate. So there's a lot of do in this area to meet the market for green backup and green power.
I think also that market is really key as a governance structure. Take the example of, like, you have 3 cars to charge, right? But the grid only can accommodate only one per time in charging. So it should be the grid operator to decide which of the cars has to be charged first? Well, no, I would say, right? It should be the market, right? I mean, they should deal with each other. Who's willing to pay most? Right? Who's most urgent to need the power? Because otherwise, others may just like wait for an hour or so because they have sufficient time. So I think markets as a governance principle should be established much more in many areas, going also really into grid control and load control whatsoever. So I think this is a key really in establishing a more distributed power. And I think it's not very strange to us, right? I mean, you would also never ask, when you have a car and you're running out of gas, you would never ask the car supplier, the car manufacturer, oh, my gas is empty. You're taking responsibility to get new gas, right? So it's our daily life to do that. Only in power it seems to be that it's not possible, or people make us thinking that it's not possible, right? But it is possible.
Just a word about the gas situation, because the green gas haven't the same maturity than electricity. We say that we can have parity with renewables electricity. In France, with green gas, that's not the case. The first obstacle to develop green gas in France is to convince ministries that gas has a role to play in the energy transition. And we think that we can reduce costs of production, but also I would like to have the same framework for gas development than the electricity development. But green gases, in fact, new babies for us. The French law allow injections into grids since 2011, so it's really it's it's really short, and so we also see what happens into the electricity framework system in order to have learnings to move our own framework with regulators, but the real difficulty to us is really to convince that green gas has a role to play with our regulator.
You wanted to add something?
Yes. Maybe another very interesting development, because everyone is talking today about blockchain as a kind of a buzzword. But I do think that the digitalization will help us tremendously in moving forward, because today the blockchain will basically enable us to track almost the electron for where it's produced to where it goes. And it will be a kind of similar revolution that what we have seen with peer-to-peer and internet, where everyone all of a sudden started downloading his own movies in peer-to-peer. The same will happen with energy, I tell you. And if the utilities don't move, people will cut the cord, put their own batteries, and start producing their own energy. So these movements already start happening in around the world, like in California is one of them, or in Australia. My cousin happens to live in Adelaide. There is a big movement there saying, basically, I cut the cord, I put my own solar, I put my own batteries, and I don't need anyone anymore. So
They actually can, yes. They are very lucky in terms of access to the resource, and yeah.
But on the other hand side, we need to stay realistic. There are still other big power consumers and big industries, and in this market it will not happen that fast. But I'm convinced that the new tools with the big amount of data that we can process, with the aggregation models, with the blockchain as being a kind of in falsifying tracking system. Today it's like you would boil 100 liters of water in a tank and you need to say it's all clean water. And in the future you can track every drop of water with the blockchain. So, and we, for instance, have a pilot project in the Netherlands with a big milk producing company called Friesland Campina, who is today installing on the roof of their farmers solar panels, and through the blockchain basically certifies that the produced energy is deep green, coming basically from the farmer. So you start seeing corporates engaging in real life aggregation and showing that up to the quarter level they are renewable and purchasing aggregated green certified energy.
It's interesting to say that, because blockchain is really, there's use cases across the value chain, and there's certification of green energy is one. There's automation of the meter to cash process, so you basically use the blockchain to automate the retailer. So you do a virtual retailer and you can offer electricity at the end user at the price that is very close to the wholesale price. Another application is actually in a sort of PPA, if you will. If you look at what WePower does, is essentially that, right? They use the blockchain to create tokens that are backed by future generated energy from developers that are developing a solar farm or a wind farm. So that's really interesting, and I like your point.
And it enables as well to sell electricity to your neighbor, like you have been presenting us with C-cells.
Last but not least, yes.
I do believe that is a great business model. How nice is it to sell your own solar power to your neighbor when you're not at home? So this creates a lot of involvement of the people in the energy transition.
So we touched briefly on gas, and I'm aware we are almost out of time. So 5 minutes, thanks. We touched upon gas, the role of gas into the energy transition, and the ambition that Europe has of going, let's say, to a fully carbon-free power sector in 20, 30 years' time. I think Germany is aiming at 80% plus renewable energy, renewable generation mix by 2050. 2050 is not so far away if you really think about it. What's the role of gas there? Are we late for coal to gas switching? Given yes, we commented on the seesaw profile of carbon prices. But if carbon prices were to go up, is burning natural gas as a bridge fuel to take us to a high renewable state even a possibility? Should we only look at biogas and renewable gas? What is your take there?
I think looking at today, even the weather conditions here in Vienna, where it's almost 20 degrees, I think it's more than urgent to stop burning fossils. So I do believe we need to accelerate and go for 100% renewable gas, being hydrogen, even if today it's a little bit more expensive. But what is the cost of a climate catastrophe? What is the cost of having a hurricane destroying half of the country, or flooding half of India and Bangladesh? I think and if we want to keep responsible for the future generations, we need to stop burning fossils. There is no way around. That's my personal opinion.
That reminds me that where I'm from Italy, we had some of the most extreme weather events just over the past couple weeks, and something that was never seen before. So yeah, I agree with you on that point. Anyone else want to comment on the role of gas?
Well, I think gas is much better than coal. We are in Germany, we are suffering under lignite even, so which is the worst of all. So I better see something which only have 200 grams of per kilowatt hour than instead of 1,000 grams. So it's only a fifth of that. So I see there's some leeway, and then it's nice that we have already this very good infrastructure in place in Europe, so we can use it for like hydrogen and others. So I think that this is matching. I think it's not. Of course, best I would like to see also stop fossils now, but that's not feasible. So then the best of the worst is, I would say, still natural gas. Sorry for pointing on you, right? And I would also say on prices. Basically we still see that specifically each of us is using more energy services all the time, right? All the prices are high in a way, right? But still, we can afford this. So obviously, it's not really expensive. It might be more expensive than others, right? But it's not expensive, so we could afford it. I think that's also good to underline, that if we put more into efficiency, then we could even afford more renewables, right? And so ultimately, we are not interested in kilowatt hours, but we are interested in energy services. And we can do this even less costly than we can do it today.
Just a short comment on this coal versus gas. If Europe has this ambition on climate gas reduction, it's not even a discussion. You don't need coal. You could not afford to have coal. And then going to gas, natural gas is really good stepstone. And also we have to see the gas system is the only fuel system that could deliver low carbon or even no carbon fuel. If you go to hydrogen, not to say you should have hydrogen for the whole European grid, that might not be relevant, but you might have some industrial clusters where you convert to use a higher amount of hydrogen, even to pure hydrogen, because then you get rid of the problem getting carbon for when you do electrolysis. So it comes to a challenge to get this carbon. You got some carbon for biogas, for some industrial processes, but then you got lack of carbon. So you got a huge amount of electrolyzer gas from the North Sea, but you don't have the carbon to methanize it. And then you really would like to have clusters with hydrogen, or even some specific pipelines operated by a gas operator where you just transport hydrogen. So hydrogen is a part of the gas system in this long ambition for very ambitious targets for Europe. And Europe is also talking now climate neutral. So that's even harsher because you still got some nature bond emissions. So carbon neutral, that says you have to take some carbon out of it and put it back in the ground. So it's really challenging. So
You wanted to add a last comment.
Basically, it was a comment on the definition of gas, because gas is available. Nature is producing gas. A cow around the corner produces an incredible amount of methane, but it's biogas and it's there. What I was, the thing I was pointing at is what we need to avoid is basically burn some resources more than they are available on the planet. And basically that's what we've been doing the last 2 centuries. So as long as the amount that we produce keeps the temperature at a reasonable level, that we don't have all these catastrophes coming up, then I think everyone in the next generations will thank us.
All right. Thank you, guys. I think this is all we had time for. I am hugely thankful for your time. I hope it's been interesting to have this discussion, as it's been for me to host you and listen to you, as well as I hope for the audience as well. I can't do other thing but wish you a great show tomorrow and the day after tomorrow. And thank you once again.